أشرقت نفسي بنور من فؤادي حينما رددت يا رب.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين وبه نستعين ونصلي ونسلم على خاتم النبيين إمامنا وقدوتنا محمد بن عبد الله وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم تسليما كثيرا إلى يوم الدين. أما بعد، اللهم لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم. اللهم علمنا ما ينفعنا وانفعنا بما علمتنا وزدنا علما وعملا يا كريم. My dear brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. I welcome you all to our 13th episode of this particular series, Islamic Morals, Manners and Etiquettes. And this obviously is the third episode for this particular season in the Students' Guild. I pray that you are all phenomenally well and enjoying the highest spirits of Iman and enjoying progress in your journey towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to protect us from all evil, and ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make this gathering a blessed one and a gathering forgiven upon its departure. Ameen. Brothers and sisters, the book that we're using or the sort of curriculum offered is from this particular book, Kitab Al-Adaab by Fuad Al-Shalhoub, and it's published by Dar Al-Qasim. And we're actually running through the topics laid down by this particular author. And we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to reward him. As we said during the first season, that the ulama did discuss adab during the different chapters of fiqh and the different writings. And now we have people coming together and bringing these adab together, and this is indeed wonderful and relevant, especially in our time where we are in need of seeing moving Muslims, where we are in need of seeing Islam in front of us rather than just in textbooks or on CDs and MP3 players and audio lectures and so on and so forth. What I mean is we need to be walking Muslims in reality. We need to walk Islam and talk Islam and show the non-Muslims through action the reality of Islam, and this is the best form of da'wah. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant us the understanding. Ameen. Brothers and sisters, in our last episode we covered quite a few etiquettes pertaining to the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We discussed the importance of tajweed, and then this concept of beautifying one's voice and how to do so, the concept of crying when listening to the recitation of the Quran, matters pertaining to the recitation of the Quran aloud, then the recommended period regarding the recitation of the Quran, and we summarized it as with 2 points. The one point being that, as Imam An-Nawawi said, that it's actually based upon the lifestyle of the person, and the recitation of the Quran should happen in such a way that it doesn't prevent them from their obligations. And we discussed another explanation, and that was based on a person's energies and their abilities to give the Quran its due during its recitation. And just before we ended that particular chapter, I shared with you another view of the scholars, and that is that there is actually no limit, as mentioned by Imam An-Nawawi and others. However, they said that a person can increase, that a person should maintain that stated in the ahadith. However, when it comes down to seasons of worship, so apologies there. We mentioned another view of the scholars just before we went on, outside of the 2 views cited, and that was that even if we stick to the timeline, like 2 months or 1 month or 7 days or 3 days, then that is following that which has come in the narrations, and this obviously is going upon the instruction of the narrations rather than working with the meaning. Imam An-Nawawi and others, they went with the meaning. They said that, look, when we study the evidences together, then we learn from it that it's a matter of convenience and doing something properly in reality, because as the Sahabi said, I am more energetic, I have energies. We find different narrations mentioning different time limits, so they went with the meaning of the narrations. However, other scholars said that, look, the time limit set in the hadith should not be ignored. We should stick to it. However, there's an exception. And this was the third point that I shared with you, or the third summary, and that was that during the seasons of worship, a person may increase and do what they can, even if it is reciting one Quran a night, as we've heard was a practice of Uthman ibn Affan radiallahu an, and Imam Abu Hanifa and others rahimahumullahu jami'an, then this is fine. And this happens during the seasons of worship, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows best. In any case, as you can see, the ijtihad of the scholars differ here. What we must ensure is that we should read the Quran every day. It shouldn't be a case, especially as a talib al-ilm, that a day goes by when we haven't opened the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and recited the words of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This should never ever happen. This is point number one. Point number two, read as much as you can, for in its recitation is great rewards. Number three, as you plan your quotas to read daily, ensure that it's not overwhelming and it's not something that stops you from reciting the Quran continuously. The next point is also plan it in such a way that when you recite it, you are able to gain maximum from the recitation in terms of your heart's development, your soul's development, the softening of the heart, and you becoming more attached to the Quran, and so on and so forth. So these are the criteria that govern. Today we find people, mashallah, they're proud to say they read 1 juz a day or 2 juz a day, but the actual quality of recitation is lacking. So quantity takes precedence over, quality takes precedence over quantity. Quality takes precedence over quantity. As you can see, it's been a slightly longer day. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant barakah and energies as well as concentration. Ameen. Ameen. With that, brothers and sisters, we move on to another set of criterion with the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that is, or just before that, we also discussed in summary to our previous session the concept of continuously reciting the Quran, and this whole thing of starting the Quran again after completing the Quran. And we discussed the matter and shared the views of the scholars and the evidences that they used, and it's all there for you to refer to. But don't forget what we said, that it's not something that we should use to cause dispute amidst societies, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows best. We also we also discussed this concept of what one should do, or is there a specific dua that one should recite after finishing the Quran outside of salah. And we said there's nothing authentic that denotes a specific dua, rather a person can make any dua that they want to make, and indeed it's a blessed time for dua. And then we touched a little bit upon, although it's not part of this particular series, about the concept of dua in salah. And I shared with you there's a difference of opinion. Some scholars say it wasn't known to be a practice to observe this dua during salah when one completes the Quran, as we find in the haram and other places, and this was the view of Shaykh Ibn Uthaymeen rahimahullah. But other scholars have evidences for it as well. From the evidences used is that it was known to be a practice from the earlier generations, and it was passed down through generations in Hijaz. And that's why we find the harams in Mecca and Medina, this practice is common there. And even though Ibn Uthaymeen rahimahullah, Shaykh Ibn Uthaymeen rahimahullah, he wasn't of the view of it being a sunnah to observe this dua in salah after the completion of the Quran. He, however, remained in the haram until the Imam completed the salah, which teaches us the wisdom of the scholars, and that not every fiqh matter is a matter that we should use to cause strife within the ummah, and we should take lessons from the practice of the great Shaykh rahimahullah. Brothers and sisters, very quickly, before we end off the etiquettes of with the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, I want to share with you 1 or 2 points, and that is barakallahu feekum, the issue of hanging the Quran on our walls and in our vehicles, and so on and so forth. And this particular practice, and is it a practice known in Islam, or is it something foreign? Is it from the teachings of Islam to do so, or is it something foreign? And The answer to that question, brothers and sisters, is quite obvious if you have been following the set of instructions throughout the series with the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that is that the Quran was revealed so that we can ponder and reflect. We can ponder and reflect over its meanings. It was sent to be recited so that we can ponder and reflect over its meanings. It wasn't sent down so that we could make a business out of it and start embroidering the Quran on cloth and selling it as a business, and then people are hanging it on the walls and so on and so forth. So this is definitely a practice disliked. This is definitely a practice disliked. And it could escalate to haram depending on how the practice is conducted, right? Sometimes it could be conducted in a way that contradicts the Sharia from several angles, and this makes it haram in totality. So we should be diligent with this. The Quran is not meant to be hung around our homes or in our vehicles or used as calligraphy and so on and so forth. This is the speech of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and it should be revered. And the greatest way to honor the Quran is to practice it and to ponder over its ayat and use it in the same way that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala commanded us to use His book in seeking cure and so on and so forth. Some people use the Quran as ta'weez, and this is a theological discussion and found in the books of Aqidah, and we know that there's a difference of opinion between the pious predecessors regarding this concept of using the Quran to tie around us as a means of protection. And even in this case we say the Quran, yes, does protect, but it protects through recitation, not through hanging it around ourselves. So we should take heed and look after the essence. The ayah in the Quran where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, كِتَابٌ أَنزَلْنَاهُ إِلَيْكَ مُبَارَكٌ لِيَدَّبَّرُوا آيَاتِهِ وَلِيَتَذَكَّرَ أُولُو الْأَلْبَابِ. That this is a blessed book which we have revealed to you, O Muhammad, so that they may ponder over its ayat, and so that those of understanding will remember. So take heed, brothers and sisters, to this practice and advise kindly. Again, it shouldn't be that we now walk into our homes and we see this and we start scolding those in the home, or we go into different people's offices or different people's homes and we advise them sternly. Rather, we should be wise. We should be wise in our da'wah, and we should advise with wisdom, because the people who have done it, they don't know, right? They don't know. And remember, there's something known as the curse of knowledge, and this has come into my mind now. It's not related, but you are students of knowledge and you will teach, and we all weak. We all have inabilities in getting the idea across to people because we are bashar. But don't ever forget the curse of knowledge, which is spoken about by academics. I came across it in the book by Chip and Dan Heath called Made to Stick, and it's probably a book which I would advise you all to read, especially as teachers, because, or as those that will propagate, because it will give you an idea how to share a concept in a way that will stick in the mind of the person listening. In any case, the curse of knowledge refers to this whole concept of a person after learning something, they don't have the ability to imagine how it is not to know it. So when you don't know how it is not to know it, you immediately impede yourself when it comes to transferring your knowledge to somebody else, because you teach it to them on a level that they are unable to grasp. Right? And he uses an example in his book about tappers. If you take a few nursery rhymes and you put like 20 nursery rhymes on a paper, for example, and you give it to the audience, and then you tell a person to come on stage and you tell this person to tap the nursery rhyme, to pick one of the 20 and start tapping it, and then you ask the people to try and pick out which nursery rhyme is being tapped, right? For example. So what happens is most won't get it. Right? Most don't get it. Even though whilst you tapping, you feel it's obvious that they will get it, and you might not understand why they can't get it. And the reason why you feel that is because you can hear the tune in your mind as you tap, but they can't hear that tune. Right? So this is the curse of knowledge, that you have a tune in your mind when you have knowledge, and when you speak it based on upon the tune you can hear, or upon the understanding that you have. And because of this, you fail to be diligent in transferring that particular knowledge. So never ever be harsh with the ummah, be gentle with them, be forthcoming, be understanding, and understand that they didn't know in the first place, and teach it to them in a manner as a complete teacher would. Some of us in our da'wah, sometimes we teach people in a way as if they should have known it, and what on earth are they doing? And because of that attitude, our whole emotion comes across and is understood in a different way, in a negative way, and sometimes our speech or the words that we use can come across in a different way. So we should take heed of this. So whilst we take these lessons and we find that our homes might have certain practices that are not ideal, let us be wise and remember what we spoke about last season, the concept of wisdom. Speaking when it's time to speak, how you should speak, and in the way that the message should be spoken. الفعل الذي ينبغي كما ينبغي في الوقت الذي ينبغي, or at the right time when that speech is carried out. So take care and take heed of all the etiquettes and elements of da'wah. The other thing, brothers and sisters, that we must discuss before closing this topic is this concept of kissing the Quran and placing it between one's eyes when we complete reading the Quran. Is it from the etiquettes of with the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that we kiss the Quran and we do so? Then this answer depends on what the person is doing. If the person, or in actual fact, a person who does it doesn't intend by it except to venerate the Quran. And venerating the Quran is the worship of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because a person who does it intends rewards from doing it. And if this is worship, then a person who's doing it without any evidence constitutes a person practicing a bid'ah, constitutes a person practicing a bid'ah. So a person who does it believing that, look, this is from and actually nobody does it except that they feel that they're honoring the Quran this way. So with that in mind, we say that this is a bid'ah, because you expect rewards from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala from doing this.